My parents lie, stole my money to fund cruises and luxury brands, then left my 5-year-old son alone for days, so what I exposed in court destroyed them. The realization hit me at 3:17 in the morning when I found my son Finn crying in his bed, soaked in his own urine, calling for grandma and grandpa, who had promised to watch him while I worked a mandatory overnight project deadline. They were supposed to be responsible adults. Instead, they were somewhere in the Caribbean spending money they'd stolen from my accounts, leaving a kindergarten to fend for himself in their house with nothing but stale crackers and empty promises. My parents, Patricia and Richard Reeves, had spent 40 years crafting their reputation as the ideal Christian couple in our small Ohio town. Patricia, a retired church secretary with perfectly styled silver hair, knew every family's business and volunteered for every charity event. Richard, who'd worked 30 years at the Ford plant before retirement, served as a deacon and coached Little League until his knees gave out. They lived in the same house they'd bought in 1982, attended the same Methodist church, and maintained friendships with the same circle of families who'd watched them raise me and my younger sister. When my marriage fell apart 2 years ago, they stepped forward as the concerned grandparents ready to sacrifice their golden years to help their struggling son raise little Finn. Patricia would tear up, telling anyone who'd listen about how they'd given up our retirement dreams to make sure that precious boy has stability. Richard would add the family comes first, always, and they'd do whatever it took to help me get back on my feet. The community ate it up. Here were these devoted grandparents, putting their own comfort aside to help their divorced son navigate single parenthood. Church ladies would stop me at the grocery store to tell me how blessed I was to have such supportive parents. My boss at the construction firm, where I work as senior project manager, would comment on how lucky I was that family was handling childcare while I rebuilt my career. For 18 months, I believed the story too. My parents picked up Finn from kindergarten every day, fed him dinner, helped with his homework, and had him ready for bed when I got home from work. They never complained about the responsibility, never asked for money beyond what I offered for groceries and gas, and seemed to genuinely enjoy having their grandson around. But small details started adding up in ways that didn't make sense. Finn would mention being really hungry during his afternoons with grandparents. Despite them claiming he'd had full meals, he'd talk about watching television for hours because grandma and grandpa were busy with important phone calls in the other room. Most concerning, he'd describe being left alone in their house while they ran quick errands that stretched longer than a 5-year-old could accurately track. I started paying attention to their appearance during pickup times. New jewelry on Patricia, expensive cologne on Richard, designer shopping bags casually left in their living room. When I'd ask about their purchases, they'd mention finding great sales or using gift cards from the church raffle. The explanation seemed plausible enough, especially since I was focused on my own struggles with work stress and single parenting. The first real red flag came when Finn started having nightmares about being lost and unable to find his grandparents. He'd wake up crying, asking me to promise I wouldn't leave him alone like grandma and grandpa did. When pressed for details, he'd become vague and scared, saying he wasn't supposed to tell me about boring grown-up stuff that would make me worry. That's when I realized I'd been so grateful for their help that I'd stopped paying attention to what that help actually looked like from Finn's perspective. I couldn't finish the whole story in this short. The full story is on my channel and linked below.